Hey everybody, Ricky Rios here to give my case study presentation. Summary, what we know is there's a young lady, Lucy, who was chosen to be an all-state cheerleader, and they asked her to go walk in the parade with her all-state peers. The principal, Mr. Stevens, was approached by the student's mother, Mrs. Bowman, who asked if the PTA would fund her daughter's trip to New York. Principal respectfully declined her request, telling her that funds were for the greater good and not for individuals up for to take trips and stuff like that. Fast forward to the Friday night basketball game, or the next home basketball game. After the game, and Mr. Stevens was counting the bags, it was found that there was $50 missing, and there were also some pre-numbered tickets that were gone. The woman who turned in that the tickets were lost was Mrs. Bowman. So what is the problem? The problem is that there is $50 less in the change bags and 10 lost or torn tickets. What do we know? Mr. Stevens is the only administrator at the middle school. There's a lot of parental involvement at the school. It's a big part of the school's culture due to lack of funds, things like that. So the parents have to get involved because they can't pay for staff. And it's also a declining SES community. So money is very important to them. The parent, Mrs. Bowman, asked PTA to fund the trip. Mr. Stevens said no. There was a community member, Mr. Dumas, who specifically stated to Mr. Stevens that he had paid with a $50 bill, and that was the same $50 bill that could not be found. There was also 10 missing tickets. What do we need to know? Was there anybody else working the gate with Mrs. Bowman to corroborate the $50 being missing out of her bag or anything like that, or the tickets? Anybody else that could have seen her through the night to say yes or no she hadn't done this? Question I want to know is, what else could have been done to help Mrs. Bowman so in the event she was found to be stealing the money? What else could have been done so that might not have been her mindset? Maybe something else for her to hold on to do. And that kind of also goes hand. What could have been done to help the student more than, just a simple no? So what other steps could have been taken? A plan of action. My first step would be to count the money again. Possibly even have a security guard count it. Mr. Stevens has a security guard with him that he takes and does a night deposit with, walks into his car, things like that. Have the security guard count it. Next, you could call Mrs. Bowman or any other gate workers to, like I said, see if they saw anything or knew anything about any of the things that are missing or gone. Third, I would contact law enforcement regardless if somebody said, here's the money back, whatever. Somebody stole from the school. That money does not belong to them. It belongs to the people, the school district, and the children. Lastly, part of the plan of action, I would start by making more thorough safeguards. This would include having 2 gate workers. That's a mandatory thing. Both workers count the money, both initial the slips. You're counting the money with the administrator when it switches hands. So you take your bag from your gate. Once you hand it over to whoever's in charge, typically an administrator, they're going to count the money in front of the 2 volunteers that work the door. Other thing I would do is, let's try and get some staff. The case study only talked about parents doing these things through the PTA, things like that. Why aren't there more staff leaders in there to help with events and functions? Be another person that these volunteers can go ask questions to. It shouldn't be the volunteers' responsibility to know all the answers for some of the tougher questions that are asked. And it would take some of the pressure off of administration. Additionally, I'd like to see there be more of a plan. If this is the first time that the situation has came up where a student wants to take a trip like this, then maybe there's not the plan, but you would like to, as an administrator, know where you could send parents so kids aren't missing out on these trips that could get them out of a low SES community, because it's going to help get them to college. things like that. And to do that, it'd be a specific fundraiser, things like that, and he'd have to work closely with the PTA. So any issues for the success of students? Increase safeguards to help create an environment where all the money raised stays in the school's possession. Obviously, there's money that has left that is not in the school's possession anymore. So there has to be the things like the 2 people working the gate, how we're counting the change bags, having people sign off on them. That's one way. The other thing you can do is start having trainings. More trainings that people have, they can understand better what it's like. They know the process of working with the school and what to do if they find a bag with $50 missing. So, the only way you can help people is by telling them if they're not always going to ask. So just start telling them, training them, doing it the right way. And then create an environment where the students feel proud of their accomplishments. They can continue their passions without fear of money not being there. It shouldn't be the school's responsibility to fund all these trips, but the schools, the PTA, the community, they can all work together and start having ideas. In this situation, you have a community that they don't have a lot of tangible items, but they have the intangibles, the things that you can't see, which is, people stepping up and saying, I can help. Well, maybe if one person can't fund a trip, maybe as a community, they can start finding ways to do that. So what was I thinking, feeling? I loved how they talked about the parental involvement. Like I said, in the SES community, you're not going to necessarily be able to give money to your school and donate money all the time in large amounts, things like that. But what you can give is you can give time. You can be a part of your students' academic awareness, knowing what's going on in the school and what the students are working for. I appreciate the firm stance that Mr. Stevens took. It's not easy to tell somebody no. Unfortunately, sometimes it is needed. I also found myself in the mindset that after I read it, Miss Bowman's guilty, and that was it. And that's not always it. Just because she had spoken to Mr. Stevens and then money came up missing does not equal guilt, and it was kind of a profiling issue just by reading it. And then last, I was disappointed that it sounds as if this girl wouldn't miss her trip. It might be a once-in-a-lifetime thing for her, something to hang her hat on, things like that. So how does this? What things were done that promoted effective and efficient management? So I kind of did this in 2 different ways. What did I do, and then what did Mr. Stevens do, or what did other people do as the administrator to help have effective and efficient management? So through some of my ideas, you've got more preventative and detective safeguards, how you count the money, who's working the gates, or how many are working the gates, and then what things are being done to help people understand that the school's money is the school's money, and the PTA money is for everybody. It's not for a group of people. So that has to happen. That can happen in the trainings in different modalities. Putting together a PowerPoint, putting together and sitting down with a group of parents and saying, all right, this is the way we do things. This is the people you talk to. Here's what happens when our funds go missing. Here's who suffers. Not only is it illegal, but you're only hurting your children by taking away from their school. And so, not all parents, just like kids, learn the same way. So your volunteers aren't all going to learn the same way. So, I was thinking about how do we give those trainings? Well, it's going to be, like I said, a PowerPoint. It's going to be a newsletter to the students, things like that. It's going to be an email with reminders, that people are always on guard. Mr. Stevens, in this case, is understanding what needs to be done to make his school run right. So then from Mr. Stevens' perspective, he did the nighttime deposits. He didn't let the money sit. He counted the money in the presence of a nonpartisan member, the security guard, who walks with him to his card before he does deposits. I felt like that part was right. There are pieces missing, but that part was right. And then he had to deny the student the use of the PTA funds, just the way like I said, that one had to be. And as an administrator, sometimes you have to make those decisions or remind people that this is the way it has to be done. It's not fun, like I said before, but it's a necessity. So then how does the school leader promote the social learning? Well, within my action plan, I talked about how could other funding events occur, and that would be getting together as a school, a community, and saying, very, whatever, we're all going to pitch in $5 and see what we come up with, the whole "it takes a village to raise a kid" sort of thing. In this situation, if you've got a lot of parent involvement, that might be possible. Who knows? But maybe they can do something else. So if, like I said before, if this is the first one, you might not be prepared for it, but the next one where the next student has earned an honor and an accomplishment like this, they don't have to miss out on it. And as a school leader, you want to be able to see your kids go on and do other things, do it bigger and better, because that might be their only chance that they get. So, and then effective function management. If you got to have effective volunteers, staff, all these things. And in this situation, they talked about basketball, cheer, track, volleyball. You want them all to run well. Students learn well when they can. Some students can learn well when they are able to do sports. So, and then Mr. Stevens, he showed off the accomplishments. It's the school-wide assemblies, things like that. You want kids to feel good about it. That's what an effective leader does. They make kids feel good about what they've done. Great parental involvement. To be a good administrator, it's always helpful to have parents involved in helping, especially when you have monetary issues and you can't pay to have an after-school program. Maybe you can pay for certain parts of an after-school program, but that's where, in this situation, you have to have volunteers. And a good leader recognizes that, you can't run staff thin all the time, but you also have to go outside of the school. And there are people that are willing to do that and want to do that. So the last one here, how does a school leader promote student academic learning? Well, in this case, Mr. Stevens, he had the school program, the after-school program with a lot of parental involvement, and then he had a program called Reading Buddies. Not a lot of parental involvement, but there was enough that came. It made a successful thing, and a successful opportunity for students. So that's a couple of different ways that he was promoting student academic learning. And the other one, just being practical, practicing ethical approach to how things are done. Sometimes you have to say no. The money belongs to the school and all the students, so if you take from it, other things are going to have to happen, and that might be contacting law enforcement, investigations, whatever. And that was the other way that he was practicing, promoting student academic learning. So that was what I came up with. Hope you all enjoyed it, and have a great weekend.